Hello, my name is Lisa Hayward. I work at the Department of Education in the Bureau of Student Wellness, and today I want to spend some time talking with you about how you can reduce student anxiety in the online environment. The presentation is geared primarily towards middle and high school audiences, but I think you can also apply it in elementary schools. So I've prepared a presentation and I'm going to share that with you. All right, we'll start with an overview of today's session. I'm going to start by talking to you briefly about benefits of online learning for students. And then we'll transition to talking about norming and how it reduces anxiety. We'll talk about how establishing your presence in an online classroom can reduce student anxiety, and how setting consistent expectations can reduce student anxiety. And finally, we'll end with some good approaches to respond to student anxiety if it happens. So quickly, the benefits of online learning are that it creates a level playing field for students. In a traditional classroom, I think we've all seen the student at the front of the room. He or she is very engaged and very active. They're the first to raise their hands. They know the answers. They can think quickly on their feet. On the other hand, we have students who might be sitting in the back of the room. They don't raise their hand very often. They don't participate very much. And we're not always sure what they're thinking as students. But in the online environment, these students have the opportunity to actually reflect and participate without the pressures of live time. So in that way, online learning does help create a level playing field for many students. As I said, the online learning environment gives students plenty of time to think about and review materials and reflect on questions. Because they're not under pressure to perform on the spot, their anxiety in the online world often goes down, and they can really demonstrate how much they do know and how well they are processing. For older students, online learning supports the theories of circadian rhythms, and that is that students don't do well at 8 o'clock in the morning. Their brains are much slower to wake up. They tend to do well later on in the day and in the evening hours. Teenagers have a really hard time in the morning. They have a hard time getting up and coming to school and focusing, but by the early evening or later afternoon hours, they're raring and ready to go. Another benefit is online learning reinforces writing skills. It's a good forum for strong writers who are already very competent, but for students who need additional writing practice, the online world is very text-based, so it helps. It does allow for creativity, believe it or not, and it can really be the best platform for socially inhibited students. In the online world, they don't have face-to-face interactions. There's not much body language that they can respond to, so they tend to do well through written language and visual images rather than interpersonal body language. So there are very many benefits to online learning. All right, let's transition to the topic. We'll talk about norming and anxiety in the virtual classroom. Unknown and inconsistent learning environments feel unsafe for students. So an unfamiliar schedule, unclear boundaries, whether those are academic or social, a completely new environment, an inconsistent or unfamiliar academic structure. These are all things the students are experiencing now, and they feel unsafe. And when a student feels unsafe, just like when an adult feels unsafe, they're going to feel anxious. Conversely, if a student is placed in a consistent and predictable environment, they're going to feel safe. And when we feel safe, we don't feel anxiety. We like the familiar, we like consistent academic structure, we like clear expectations, we like to feel emotionally and socially safe. And when we're safe, we're calm and we're stable, and we can participate in the learning process. So in a brick and mortar institution or school, students know what to expect when they get dropped off in the morning, or when they get off the bus in the morning, or when they walk to school in the morning. They know what their day is going to be like when they walk into a brick and mortar school. They walk in the front door, the principal might be there, their friends might be there, they know where the bathrooms are, they know where their schedules are found, where their lockers are, where the materials are. So it's a very structured and safe environment that they've had primarily a lot of experience in. So right from the get-go in a brick and mortar institution or school, students feel safe and they don't feel as much anxiety. It's your job to recreate these consistent structures in the virtual classroom, because the biggest cause of student anxiety is not feeling safe. And the good news is that there are lots of preventative ways that teachers and staff and administrators can engage in and create so that the students feel very safe in a virtual classroom. So your job is to create a predictive, consistent and structured virtual learning environment and community that will reduce student anxiety. In sum, when students are anxious, they often won't log on virtually and participate. It's the role of the teacher and the instructor to reduce anxiety and promote learning. And finally, when students know what to expect academically and socially in the online environment, they're going to be more willing to log on, participate, and learn. So how do you reduce anxiety? Moving myself down. The biggest thing that you can do is to reduce anxiety through your presence. Log onto your course site at least twice a day. You don't have to be logged on all day, but at least twice a day. And let students know when you're going to be in the course site. So establish a schedule. So for example, you might log on between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and then you might log on again between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. You choose. Log on at a time that's consistent every day and let your students know when you're going to be logging on. Establish a daily open office hour. So many of your students, just like they do in the traditional classroom, are going to want to talk to you. They might want to tell you something. They might have questions for you. So establish virtual daily office hours and make sure they're consistent. Likewise, students might have questions for you that they might be embarrassed to ask in front of their peers. They might be related to their grades. They might want to tell you something about their lives. So make sure that you give those students private office hour opportunity. You don't have to have them all the time, but you need to have a process that students know they can follow to gain access to a private talk time with you. So have private office hours, possibly by request. And above all, have a clear communication policy. Let your students and their families know how and when they're going to communicate with you and how and when you're going to communicate with them. So teacher presence is safe and it leads to diminished anxiety. So here's an example of what you might use with older students for establishing consistent presence. You might have office hours every day between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. Private office hours, if you would like a private office hour or a phone call, email me. Have an email communication policy. I'll respond to email within 24 hours during the week and 48 hours on the weekend. Other, I'm happy to speak with you via Zoom or Gmail live chat, but you'll need to schedule it with me ahead of time. And then have a grading policy so students know when they're going to hear back from you about work they've submitted. Here's an example. I'll respond to your discussion forums no later than 12 hours after you've posted. I'll grade your assignments no later than 2 days following the due date of the assignment, unless I notify you otherwise. So give yourself flexibility. You decide how you want to communicate with students and when, but let them know and give it to them visually. Active and consistent presence will reduce student anxiety. It will reduce your anxiety. It's an effective way to manage your time because you don't need to be logged on all the time. And less anxiety equals more learning. So part 2, how do you reduce anxiety through consistent academic expectations? You do this through writing. Don't assume that students know what you expect. They probably don't. In a traditional classroom, every time you give them an assignment, you're going to have a group of students who have got questions. So think about and anticipate the types of questions they're going to have about their assignments and put it in writing. You're going to find in the online world that if one student feels anxiety or is uncertain about assignments, that feeling tends to spread throughout the class. So the more clear you are in writing up front, the less anxiety your students will feel. Be consistent with your due dates as much as possible. I mean, if you have a paper due every week, make sure it's due every week by 6 p.m. on Friday or 4 p.m. on Thursday, whatever it is, but be consistent with your assignment due dates or your test dates or your discussion forum dates. So students can structure their online work in a time where there's a lot of upheaval and change. Be consistent with your assignment submission format. Let students know how they're going to submit their assignments to you. Is it going to be via email? Is it going to be through the assignment Dropbox in a learning management system? Is it going to be picked up by the school bus? However it is, make sure it's as consistent as possible. If you've got rubrics and your students are familiar with them, use them so you can give students prompt feedback and they know what to expect. Also give students consequences for non-participation. Just like in a brick and mortar classroom, if a student doesn't show up for class, there are going to be consequences. Let students in the online environment know what the consequences are going to be for non-participation, and also what students should do if they're unable to participate because of technology challenges. Don't assume students know. They don't. They ask lots of questions in class. Predict the type of questions they might ask you and address them in the course site or in the assignment in writing. Students want to please you primarily, and students who know what to do and how to behave online will be more successful. As an aside, there's a strong link between student dishonesty and unclear student expectations, but that's a talk for another day. So you want to create clear academic expectations, and as a result, your students will feel less anxiety. Part 3, reduce anxiety by establishing clear social emotional interaction guidelines. Best practices for this are to have a netiquette. You can Google netiquette and you'll come up with any number of good examples of things to include. Once you have a netiquette, post it in your course site or however you communicate with your students. Let students know what the expectations are. And if a student doesn't follow them or missteps, respond swiftly and consistently to them. And if possible, do this publicly. You don't want to berate a student publicly, but for students who might feel bullied in an online environment, they need to know, and everyone else in the class needs to know, that it's not acceptable and that you are going to address it face on. So this allows a student to feel safer. They know you've got their back. They know you're there, you're watching over them, and they're going to feel a lot safer and a lot less anxious. If you haven't used student learning contracts, now might be a good time to start. For some reason, of all ages, whether it's adults or kids in high school, students who sign a netiquette and an academic honesty contract up front tend to follow them more readily than students who don't sign a netiquette or an academic honesty contract. So create a little contract for your class. The students will say something like, I've read, I understand, and I agree to the terms of the netiquette. Have them sign it, date it. You'll be well on your way to a happy, positive classroom environment. Here's some example of one that I use in a college level class, but you can make this developmentally appropriate and use it in middle school or high school. So I simply have students check off the following boxes. I've read the syllabus, I understand it and agree to its term. I've read and understand the netiquette. I've read and agree to the terms of the academic honesty contract. I affirm that all the work submitted in this course is my own unless specifically stated otherwise. So really what you're doing is you're establishing the framework, you're norming the students for the online environment. They agree to it, they feel safe, they're not anxious, and they can focus on their learning. So how do you reduce anxiety through predictable learning spaces? So this is really a focus on the prevention of the academic structure. So students tend to do well if they know how their content, their academic content, is going to be organized. And in the online world, the best way to do this, especially during a time of crisis, is to do it through weekly content organization. Because of the way that things are unfolding now and the pressures that families are under, giving students daily content organization can increase their stress exponentially. If they're living in a household where there are shared resources, where there might be unstable bandwidth, where they might not be able to find peace and quiet to do their work, a daily schedule can be challenging. But a weekly schedule allows students to plan their week more effectively, and they might also be able to plan it with their families. So here's an example of what a weekly structure might look like. So you've got week 1 or week 7, whatever it is you want to call your week. You've got a title, and then you've got your date range. So set up a folder for students in the online environment with their weekly work laid out. And when a student opens the folder, they're going to see that the content is organized consistently every week. So you might have a week overview, you might list weekly readings, you might list weekly videos that they can watch, you might have a section for additional materials, a discussion forum, the list of the weekly assignments, and weekly tests if you have them. So come up with a structure that works for you and your content, and really stick to it in each of your weekly folders. Because what you're doing is giving students a strict structure that they understand and is going to be consistent, and that when they log on to their course room every few days or every day, they know what it's going to look like. So they're going to be much more at ease than if they were to log on and have a different organization every week or every day. So here's an example of the Blackboard. Blackboard is a course management system or a learning management system. The students click on week 1 and they're going to see overview, so they know this is what the overview of the week is like. Then they'll scroll down and they'll see their required readings, and then they'll scroll down and they'll be able to watch any videos that the teacher has embedded, etc., etc. So it's very consistent and very predictable. No surprises. Any change to a consistent structure, even a positive change, is going to cause anxiety and confusion. So work ahead, make sure you have your weekly folders set up and ready to go, and try not to change them once they've been made available to the students. A best practice is to have a written open forum where students can ask their questions. So in a learning management system like Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle or Google Classroom, you can create a discussion forum or a forum called My Questions. And it's simply an open spot where students can ask questions and encourage students to respond to their fellow peers. So have an open forum where students can ask you when you might not be online about anything that they have questions about. Finally, what happens when things go wrong? what happens when your students feel anxious. You've got everything in place, your content is organized, you've established your presence, you've got netiquette guidelines, but you've got students who will still feel anxious. And this will, of course, happen. So the first thing you can do is congratulate yourself for creating an environment where most students won't feel anxiety. So you know it's not you, you know it's not your content, you know this is an individual student situation. Reach out to your students if you sense that he or she or they feel anxious. And remember, if a student is absent from the course room, it could be anxiety related. Reach out to them and ask them to talk to them and find a tool that works best for them. So make an offer. Do you want to talk on the phone? Do you prefer email? Do you want live chat? Let them know that you're available to work with them in a format that works best for them. And if this is a student who has an additional academic support team or another support team, find a way, have a process to reach out to the teams that embrace the individual students who might be challenging. So don't try to go this alone if you know there's a broader network to help the student. When you make contact and connect with the student, what they need more than anything is reassurance. So reassure them that you're going to work together to find a solution. They don't have to find the solutions to their problems themselves. They're not alone. Let them know it's okay when things go wrong, that it's normal to feel anxiety, that you understand it's difficult, but it's okay. And let the students know that they've got one task at this time, and it's primarily to let you know they're feeling anxious, and so that you can help them. So again, reassure the students that they're not alone and you're there to help them. And even if you can't help them short term, you'll figure it out with them long term. So you want to reduce their anxiety. So in summary, the things we've spoken about today are what you can do to create a preventative structure to mitigate student anxiety. We spoke a little bit about norming. Norming is how do you create a virtual classroom with standards and expectations that the students know what to expect. We've spoken about establishing your presence to reduce anxiety. We've discussed setting consistent expectations to reduce anxiety. We've talked about how organizing your content consistently reduces student anxiety. And finally, a little bit about a responsive plan so that you know what to do when students feel incredible anxiety. So if this were a live session, I would be able to ask you if you have any questions for me, but because it is not a live session, I invite you to reach out to me via email. My email is lisa.haywood@doe.nh.gov. I've been teaching online for many, many years. I'm super happy to help. Here if you need anything, reach out, and I hope this was a useful session to you.